The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. I have to pretend like, oh, God, well, crazy that we're in front of this.
Wait, how often are you in line for the Snow White ride?
I'm a narcissist.
Rachel Zegler has found herself at the center of a heated storm following the release of Disney's live-action Snow White. What should have been a career-defining moment for the young actress has instead turned into an overwhelming wave of backlash, controversy, and emotional turmoil. Critics and audiences alike have not held back in voicing their disappointment, not just with the film itself, but also with Zegler's casting and personal responses to the uproar. From the moment Snow White was announced, controversy began to swirl. Rachel, best known for her role in West Side Story, was cast as the iconic princess in June 2021. While some fans welcomed the casting choice, others reacted with outrage. Traditionalists and conservative Disney fans took issue with the fact that Snow White, a character described in the Brothers Grimm fairy tale as having skin as white as snow, was being portrayed by a Latina actress of Colombian and Polish descent. For many, this was a betrayal of the character's historical depiction, and they weren't afraid to voice their anger. The online discourse grew even more intense when leaked details of the film surfaced. In this new adaptation, Snow White's name was no longer tied to her skin color, but rather to her resilience after surviving a brutal snowstorm. Some saw this as a creative and progressive update, while others saw it as an unnecessary rewrite of a beloved classic. The debate over representation quickly became toxic, turning Zegler into an unwilling symbol in the ongoing culture war over Hollywood's approach to diversity and inclusion. Rachel, never one to remain silent in the face of criticism, stood her ground. She passionately defended her casting, stating that Snow White is a fairy tale for everyone, not just those who fit a specific mold. She pointed out that the character had been adored in Spanish-speaking countries for decades, making her casting a celebration of the story's universal appeal. However, rather than cooling tensions, her comments only seemed to add fuel to the fire. What really sent traditionalists into an uproar was Rachel's candid criticism of the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. In multiple interviews, she described the classic film as outdated and weird, suggesting that the new adaptation would take a modern approach to the princess's journey. Gone was the damsel in distress waiting for a prince to save her. Instead, this Snow White would be a leader in her own right, focused on ruling her kingdom rather than finding romance. While some audiences appreciated this fresh take, many longtime Disney fans were livid. To them, it was yet another example of Hollywood tampering with a beloved classic under the guise of modernization. Then came the film's release, and the numbers were brutal. Snow White struggled at the box office, bringing in only $43 million domestically and $87 million globally during its opening weekend. Considering the film reportedly cost at least $350 million to produce and market, those numbers spelled disaster. Critics slammed the film, citing a weak script, uninspired performances, and a lack of the timeless Disney magic that made the original a masterpiece. Fans were just as unforgiving, with many boycotting the movie entirely. As the film floundered, the scrutiny on Rachel intensified. She became the face of Snow White's failure, with critics and online commentators directing their anger at her personally. However, rather than being crushed under the weight of the backlash, Rachel pushed back. In an emotional moment, she addressed the hate she was receiving, accusing some of her detractors of racism and pointing out that a portion of the audience seemed determined to see the movie fail simply because of her ethnicity. Her tearful response was both heartbreaking and revealing. While it's clear that Snow White's underwhelming performance was the result of multiple factors, ranging from script issues to marketing missteps, Rachel found herself shouldering much of the blame. But in a surprising twist, the very negativity directed at her has also sparked a wave of support. Many observers argue that rather than diminishing her, the backlash is showcasing her resilience and strength. The saga surrounding Rachel Zegler and Snow White has become far bigger than a single film's box office results. It's now a reflection of the broader cultural divide over Hollywood's evolving storytelling, representation, and the fierce resistance that often follows change. Whether you see Rachel as a victim of unwarranted hate or as a controversial figure who misstepped in her handling of the criticism, one thing is clear: this is a moment in entertainment history that won't be forgotten anytime soon. Rachel Zegler publicly expressed her solidarity with Palestine in the wake of the war in Gaza, which sparked even more controversy. All these factors piled up, making the lead up to the film's release an absolute storm for Zegler. It wasn't just about playing Snow White. It became a tangled web of race, politics, and public perception. The combination of these controversies ensured that Snow White wasn't just another Disney remake. It became a full-blown cultural moment with Zegler at the center. Her support for Palestine led to additional backlash, with critics accusing her of being politically divisive. That reportedly was the final straw for Disney. According to Tatiana Siegel, Variety's executive editor of film and media, Snow White producer Mark Platt flew to New York to have a serious conversation with Zegler about the consequences of a tweet she posted. After thanking fans for watching the film's first trailer, Zegler included the words, "And always remember, free Palestine." While her message was a personal expression of solidarity, it sparked a significant wave of backlash, particularly from those who felt it was too political for a film meant to be a lighthearted Disney remake. The tweet appeared to be a tipping point for Disney, which was already dealing with multiple controversies surrounding the film. Mark Platt's trip to New York signaled the studio's concern over the impact of Zegler's personal views on the movie's reception. The pressures surrounding the film's release were immense. It was no longer just about casting or the approach to the fairy tale. It was about how public statements were potentially jeopardizing the movie's success. What followed was a serious conversation between Zegler and the producer as Disney weighed the ramifications of the situation. This seemed like a last-ditch effort to control the narrative before the film hit theaters. Zegler's relationship with Disney had already begun to unravel in 2022 during a contentious West Side Story awards season campaign. It further deteriorated when she disparaged the beloved original Snow White. Siegel reported that Zegler stood her ground and the tweet remained posted. According to Siegel, things escalated quickly after that, and Disney found itself in a difficult position. Reportedly, the studio was forced to pay for additional security for Snow White co-star Gal Gadot, an Israeli actress who had expressed support for her country following the October 7th attacks. This came as a direct result of the fallout from Zegler's tweet about Palestine. Disney appeared caught in the middle of a cultural and political storm and took drastic measures to protect its stars. The backlash online was intense. Some criticized Disney for making such a big deal out of the situation. One user on X wrote, trying to blame Rachel Zegler's humanity for Snow White flopping instead of the fact they hired the worst actress in the history of mankind is quite a move. Another added, it was just a bad movie. Rachel was excellent in it, but like almost every other Disney remake, it was all around terrible. They could have cast anyone as Snow White and it still would have flopped. But the controversy didn't stop there. Disney reportedly hired a social media expert to vet all of Zegler's posts, particularly after she made headlines for disparaging Donald Trump in response to his 2024 re-election campaign. This move made it clear that Disney was increasingly concerned about Zegler's outspoken nature and the potential damage her personal opinions could inflict on the film and the studio's image. The fact that Disney hired a specialist to monitor her social media suggests they viewed her as a liability, a costly one at that. As the film's release date approached, Disney wasn't just worried about Snow White's box office performance. It was also focused on the public image of everyone involved. By the time Snow White finally premiered, it was evident that Disney was distancing itself from Zegler. The studio seemed to be trying to shift focus away from her as much as possible, and the premiere reflected that. The event was scaled down significantly, held in the afternoon, and closed off to the press. While a source close to the studio claimed this was standard procedure for Disney's family films, it was hard to ignore the stark difference between this and the glitzy premiere Moana 2 received just months earlier. Behind the scenes, whispers emerged about Disney's dissatisfaction with Zegler. Unnamed sources indicated that the studio wasn't thrilled with either her performance or her public persona. One anonymous source from another studio told Vulture ahead of the premiere, "The reality is Rachel Zegler should not be playing Snow White." It seemed like Disney wasn't just trying to manage the film's release quietly. They were actively distancing themselves from their leading lady. This only added to the growing tension and drama surrounding the project. The situation made it clear that, despite Snow White garnering attention, Zegler was being treated as a liability. Online, the situation escalated to the point where some even compared Zegler to Gina Carano, the actress fired from The Mandalorian for her controversial political views. After facing intense backlash for about a week, Zegler followed the typical celebrity playbook. She issued an apology. In her statement, she admitted that her emotions got the best of her and that she regretted contributing to the negative discourse. She added a conciliatory, "We need to respect differing opinions" message and promised to be more positive moving forward. But did her apology work? Not exactly. Some fans appreciated that she took responsibility, but others remained skeptical, viewing it as a classic PR move. Damage control after realizing Disney wasn't going to support her. Speaking of Disney, the studio remained notably silent throughout the entire ordeal. While Zegler bore the brunt of the backlash, Disney seemed to be sitting back and waiting for the storm to pass. They weren't exactly rushing to publicly support her, and that certainly didn't help the situation. So while Zegler attempted to smooth things over with her apology, it's safe to say not everyone was convinced. Disney, for its part, focused on staying out of the controversy as much as possible, hoping that the drama would die down over time. Whether or not that strategy worked remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: Snow White was far from just another Disney remake. It became a cultural flashpoint, and Zegler was at the heart of it all.